Policymakers are grappling with how to manage the future of marine farming in the Marlborough Sounds. The licences for more than half of nearly 600 marine farms throughout the Sounds will expire over the next 8 years, farms established before the current Resource Management Act was created. In an insight investigation, Tracy Neal has been exploring what changes might be in store for marine farmers, including the local Te Atiawa, who as kaitiaki have been living in the Sounds for centuries.
The sunken valleys of the Marlborough Sounds have long been a treasured place, providing Māori and early European visitors to New Zealand with good shelter and sources of foods. There are 8 tribes in Te Tau Ihu, the top of the South Island, and Te Atiawa is mana whenua in the Queen Charlotte Sound. The head of the Iwi Trust, Glenys Payne, explains why it's special.
Te Atiawa and other tribes came down from the North Island in the Inahiki in the early 1800s. So our people have lived and worked in the Sound since that time.
Mrs Payne has chaired the Te Atiawa Trust since it was established in 2012 as the post-settlement governance entity. About $200 million in settlements have come Marlborough's way. Glenys Payne says Te Atiawa used a portion of its share to invest in a small but growing interest in aquaculture.
For Te Atiawa, we would rather invest our money in the region and not, for instance, in a car park in Auckland. But that investment, if we're looking at aquaculture, is becoming more and more fraught. It's not a sure thing.
About 350 marine farms were installed throughout the Sounds before resource consents were introduced. Marlborough's Mayor Alistair Soman says it's too difficult and costly to look at each application individually. A working group has been set up to figure out a plan for managing the process, which Mrs Payne says is a good idea.
The costs are getting prohibitive in the aquaculture industry and the obstacles are growing to actually participating or developing.
The government has told the Marlborough Council it needs a better mechanism for handling the mountain of work that's emerging. Environment Minister Nick Smith knows it's going to be a balancing act addressing everyone's needs and concerns. The Sounds were his childhood playground, and he says they remain a favoured place for him to chill out.
When you're in a bit of a stressful patch in my occupation, my favourite letting go is to get out in the kayak, full of tent, a good dose of Nelson wine. I've got a brother-in-law who's a very keen fisherman, and so spent many a time fishing all the way out to the very outer reaches. Just in terms of work, it is one of the very special environments in New Zealand.
Marine scientist Rob Davidson, who's monitored the effects of marine farming in the Sounds for years, says there have been positive steps taken to keep it in check.
Prior to about 1995, there was no requirement for marine farmers to provide a biological report. Since that time, it's a standard practice now. And so that's been a big step in increasing the knowledge about what the farms do.
Mr Davidson says the ribbon development that's occurred along the coastline in much of the Sounds is now at its peak. In other words, the coastline is now full. Mrs Payne maintains it's in Te Atiawa's interest to use the Sounds resources sustainably, and what's good for Te Atiawa benefits the wider community.
This is where we belong, this is part of our soul, and of course it's in our interest to look after them. And that's who we are, that's what we do.
The Council says a plan for the consents renewal is expected well ahead of the 2024 deadline. Mō te hōtaka, o te ahi ko Tracy Neal tēnei.
And you can hear more on this on Insight just after the 8 o'clock news on Wallace's program on Sunday morning on RNZ National.